Hello, welcome back to Christopher Taylor with Sovereign Harmony, my channel here. It's good to see you. It's just before Christmas right now. I think it's Tuesday, maybe? I don't know. I don't even know what day it is. I think it's Tuesday the 20th, actually, yes. Tomorrow is the solstice, December 21st, Wednesday, early morning Pacific time. And so we have Christmas coming up and then the New Year. And so what I want to talk about today is 2017. So 2017, it came quick. And so I want to talk about the major configurations that are happening, kind of walk us through it, through each segment of the year, what's going on, the retrogrades, etc., and kind of what it all means. And so last time I spoke with you was just before the election, and yes, me and every other astrologer out there got it wrong. I think it had nothing to do with the astrology. It had to do with just assuming that Hillary Clinton was going to get in because, you know, she is run by the elites and they were going to put her in. So it was a big surprise for everyone, good or bad, whatever it was a big surprise, but it doesn't change anything. So if you remember what I talked about, I might rehash a little bit of it, but if you remember what I talked about as far as Trump's role in the, as far as the consciousness of humanity, in terms of him having Regulus rising on his chart, and him kind of heralding in that transition of Regulus in Leo into Regulus in Virgo. So you have to go back to my previous video to get a little bit more in depth on that, but that's exactly what his job is. I assumed it was the election process that was enough to transition us, but apparently we need about 4 years at least of that transition. So Trump is going to be a really good, I say good as in, quote unquote, appropriate model for this transition because he represents the shadow side of Regulus in Leo, which is what we're getting rid of. Okay, so what really the overall meaning of the election, just so we can talk about that and get past it, because it's gonna affect us here in 2017, obviously, with who is going to be president. But you'll see that 2017, the energy that I'm going to talk about is actually really, really positive. So it's not as bad as people are seeing the future right now. And so, but the higher meaning of this election process with Trump coming in here again, it was just to show us that we are ready to change the system. Okay, and I talked about that in my previous video with Pluto and Capricorn and Regulus into Virgo. So I would recommend going back to that about how the system is changing and whatnot. And so what this really represents is that we're at the end of the rope. We're at the end of the road. And so what you need to do at the end of the road when you're done with something is face all of it. And so Trump represents all of the darkness, all of the shadow that lies beneath that needs to be released before we can move into something new. Okay? So it's a good thing in fact, if you don't like Trump, Trump in office is a good thing. It's a weird thing to say, but the idea being that if you don't like what he represents, we have to get through that to get past that. And so right now is like the final gauntlet. So it's like we can either avoid the gauntlet and stay, asleep, so to speak, or we can just move through it and get to the next phase. And so we're ready to get to the next phase, at least on an unconscious level, because he was voted in. Whether or not the system, if you agree with the Electoral College or not, he was voted in by the current system. So as a collective consciousness, we're ready to face the shadow, to get over it, and to get through it, and so that we can have a new way of being, which has nothing to do with, the other competitor there, Hillary Clinton. She represents the old, and that's what we're leaving, is that old guard, that old elite ruling everything. Trump is no hero, but he's the shadow that we need to get through to get past it. So anyway, that's all I'm going to say about that for now. We'll talk a little bit more about our perceptions of truth and whatnot as we talk about the planets in 2017. So that takes me to the kind of the general theme of 2017. And it's really, the theme has a lot to do with an expanded sense of truth and improved relations. Okay, so what I mean by that, and it's interesting that we have this whole idea of fake news coming out in the mainstream media lately, which I'll talk about that as well. But that's right in line with the energy that we're talking about in 2017, where I just said expanded sense of truth, meaning that instead of there being a black and white, we're learning to step into our own sovereign authority, our own sovereign truth. And there's no better or easier way to have an opportunity to step into our sovereign authority and truth than to have someone in authority that we disagree with. And that's going to be a scenario, I think, for a large number of Americans with Trump in the presidency, they're not going to agree with him. And so instead of being able to hide behind the authority figure and put all your power into the authority figure, we're kind of forced, if we disagree, to be our own authority and to kind of gather in a different way. And so that is actually an opportunity for growth, an opportunity to establish more sovereign entities, sovereign authority being the central theme. So it's like, thank you, Trump. Thank you for allowing me to step into my authority because of disagreement. I mean, we have to disagree to be free. It's the way it is. And so we can't, hide behind who we give our power to. And it's amazing how many people are giving their power to Trump and how much power they're giving him. Just the mention of him can send people into a tizzy. And that's a lot of power that he's been giving if you're allowing yourself to emotionally react to someone's presence or someone's ideas. And so what's happening, I think, beginning of this phase is people are going to be reacting into that, but they're going to learn how to take more sovereign control and have more sovereign authority and be more emotionally sovereign and understand that their thoughts can differ from another's and that they can both exist in the same space even if they disagree, which improves your relationships. Okay? And so that's the other side of the theme for 2017 is the improved relations, right? And so it's really the more we expand our ability to accept what we don't agree with, the better our relationships get. I mean, that's the harmony side of sovereign harmony. So the more we step into our sovereign truth, the more opportunity we have to harmonize because we're accepting ourselves as different and not having to be codependently linked or enmeshed in order to be okay. Okay, and that's this big tear that's happening right now. I think a lot of people, especially on the left-wing side, identified with Obama. They felt like Obama was a comfort, and that comfort prevents growth, unfortunately. And so not being able to hide behind daddy anymore, essentially, and having to stand in your own truth is what the Trump opportunity is presenting to people that might have favored Obama, for example. And so this is a really great opportunity. And so what I'm going to do is just kind of go through the major configurations here in 2017, and we'll kind of step through each of the retrogrades and whatnot too. So right off the bat here, we're already in a Mercury retrograde. So on the 19th, which was yesterday, Mercury went retrograde. It'll be retrograde till January 8th. And so this retrograde is starting in Capricorn, moving back into Sagittarius. And the entire time of the retrograde, it's very interesting. Mars entered Pisces yesterday within an hour or so of when Mercury went retrograde. And when Mercury exits its shadow around the 27th, 28th of January, that's when Mars will exit Pisces. So this whole Mars in Pisces time from about December 19th to January 27th or so is also this time of the Mercury retrograde and then the finishing up of the shadow of Mercury. And so they're related. If I look at it this way, I want to say they're related. There's an energy mix there. And so what we're doing over this next several weeks into, say, mid to late January, is we're reviewing all of the rules that we live by, the internal rules that we don't even recognize, that prevent us from growth, that prevent us from expanding beyond our comfort zones, etc. And what we're doing is analyzing that, because all Mercury retrogrades are periods of analyzing and rehashing and reconsidering. And so we're reconsidering what is possible in our lives. And so with Mercury backing into Sagittarius, we're expanding on our possibilities and saying, well, what about this? What about that? This, that didn't work for me last time, but maybe it can work this time. And so the rules that prevent us from going forward, and that say, no, if I want this, I have to do this. That's what we're readjusting. And so at the end of this period, mid to late January, we're probably going to be stepping into some territory we wouldn't normally step into. That's good for our growth. It's a good step toward the future, for our own future, but that we wouldn't do if we didn't have this period to really see how we get in our own way. Okay? And with Mars in Pisces this entire time, it's really about being creative. So we're going way outside the box. There's nothing, we're kind of leaving practicality at the door in a way, so that we can really touch into our creativity and really experiment with how or what is possible. So expect that kind of an energy from now until mid to late January. When we get into February, this is when we're going to have a couple of eclipses, okay? And so the first one's like February 10th, and that's going to be in late Leo. It's a full moon lunar eclipse. And then February 26th will be a solar eclipse in Pisces around 8 degrees or so, something like that. And so this will be a portal switching kind of time where the train tracks are shifting, and I'll have more about this when it comes up. I'll probably post a video right before the eclipse just to get more detail. But just know that, what we figure out here in January as far as how we want to adjust our internal thought patterns and internal rules and restrictions to allow us more growth. In February, what we're going to do is be opening up kind of new roads that we could travel down. And immediately on the heels of that will be Venus going retrograde. And so Venus goes retrograde once every 18 months. The last time was the summer of 2015, so just about a year and a half ago. And so we're having another one. And Venus will retrograde from about mid-Aries back into late Pisces. And this will start in March, I think March 4th, and all the way through April 15th. So for about 6 weeks, Venus will be retrograde. And so when Venus goes retrograde, it's like a Mercury retrograde in that there's a lot of reevaluation and whatnot. Only the focus of the reevaluation is on our finances, on our relationships, etc. And so, especially this particular retrograde of Venus, where it's Aries, the first sign of the zodiac, backing into the last sign of the zodiac, Pisces, this really tells me that there's going to be a lot coming back from our past over that 6-week period, March into the first half of April. And that opportunity for our past to come up, whether it's actual individuals coming back into our lives, old relationships and that kind of thing, or old issues through those relationships that we have to now deal with. The idea being is that whatever the old patterns were, and that's that Pisces is kind of the end of the road there, we're going to have a new birth in our relationships and in our sense of self-worth in general, which can reflect itself in money and what we think we can earn, or what we are allowed to earn, or what we allow ourselves to earn, okay? And so the March-April period is going to be a little shifty, not the best period to start new relationships, but a great period to reevaluate your relationships, your current ones. And you'll probably notice that, again, that things from the past will come up. And so that's going to be the focus for that time period. When we get into April, on the tail end of that retrograde, in early April, Mercury will go retrograde again. And this time it'll retrograde from about April 9th, I think, until like early May. And so that retrograde is going to be from Taurus back into Aries, okay? And so the theme of all the retrogrades for this year, for the most part, is going from an earth sign, like in this case it's Taurus, back into a fire sign, in this case Aries. And the one we're in now, this Mercury retrograde now, is going from an earth sign, Capricorn, back into a fire sign, Sagittarius. And so this earth back into fire is the theme for the Mercury retrogrades this year. And so what that has to do with is, think of like fire burning up that physical structure of the earth, because the earth represents a physical structure. And so in this case, right now, we're going through this burning up of old rules that we live by. And in the spring, that April into May retrograde, will be burning up old stubborn ideas of who we are, okay? So one is kind of just our rules we live by, and the one in the spring is just who we are. Like, I'm not that, I am that. And it kind of goes back to the theme of disagreeing with Trump or disagreeing with anybody in your life. And the idea being setting new boundaries around who we are and understanding who we're not. And so it's a real period of solidification, April into May. And it's right after the Venus retrograde suggests to me that now that we have a new birth in our relationship and our sense of self-worth, now we have a better solid sense of our boundaries following that up. And at that point, June, July, actually, before we get there, May is actually going to be also a pretty big month as well. The lunar nodes, the moon's nodes, will actually shift from Virgo Pisces, where they are now, into Leo Aquarius. And so we've been focusing for the last year and a half or so, almost the same time frame that the last Venus retrograde was, with the North Node in Virgo, South Node in Pisces. And so what we've been doing is trying to find ways to make our dreams a reality, a practical reality in our daily lives. And so that theme will continue until early May, when it switches, and at that point, it's going to be a theme of kind of refocusing our energy on our own expressions and our own creations, rather than having it scattered about in the ethers, basically. So and around other people and other people's issues and problems and things. So we'll be refocusing on our own creations, and so it's also utilizing anything we've learned from others to apply for ourselves. And so it's like using whatever we've learned from the village to do on our own. And so that will be for the next year and a half, from the spring of 2017 right on till about early 2019. Okay, and so that'll be the theme. Actually, it'll be late 2018 is when it'll switch again. So for a while, and so that we'll notice that shift as well. What also happens in May, so that will be around May 9th, 10th, something like that. And then when we get to like mid to late May, this is when there'll be an opposition between Venus and Jupiter. And I bring that up, if you saw my video a couple videos ago, I talked about the Jupiter-Venus dance. So this is going to be finishing up. This opposition will be a finishing touch on something that started in about late August, early September. So some seeds were planted in late August, early September with regards to a new project to work on, new relationship, that kind of thing. Around Thanksgiving, when Venus was squaring Jupiter, actually on Thanksgiving Day, there was some cultivation of that, some nurturing of what was started. And now, when we get to mid to late May, after this whole period of review in our relationships with Venus retrograde in March and April, we get to May, everything's finished, we have a better sense of self, who we are, who we're not. All of a sudden, we have this culmination, and we're kind of ready to be ourselves within relationship in a way we couldn't before. And like I said, Trump is helping us do this. Trump is actually helping us understand how to be a sovereign, separate self, disagree with someone, and create harmony despite it, okay? Because we have to deal with the fact that we disagree with someone who's in power, right? And so that teaches you how to do that in your life too. And so that is a huge thing that's happening in the collective right now. And so he's really serving a pretty appropriate role, if you look at it that way. He's helping us face the shadow. He's helping us understand how to be okay with disagreeing with someone, and being okay with our own lives, and understand we have the power no matter what someone else thinks or what someone else believes, right? And so when we get to May, is the sense of new opportunities for relationships that reflect our individual sovereign self in a way that we couldn't do before, and in a way that this Venus retrograde is going to help us in March and April to figure it out, okay? And so that's a pretty potent time, I think. May is, like, to me, like the best month of 2017, and it's for those reasons that I've mentioned. So we'll be kind of thrust into it. It could be potentially making a ton of money that we've never made before, simply because we're in a better space mentally, and we're more confident. We're in our sovereign sense of what is possible, and so we're just opening up the energy for money to come in, as well as relationships, etc. So the summer will just kind of take that energy and utilize it all the way through till we get to August, when we get another set of eclipses and another Mercury retrograde. So August will be a pretty shifty month too, but I expect May to be kind of like this explosion of opportunity that just kind of rolls into June, into July, and into August. And so it's like that late spring or into the midsummer. It looks like a really great time of this year. And when we get to August, there'll be some shifts. There'll be a lunar eclipse, I believe, in early August. That will be in the middle of Aquarius. And then there'll be a solar eclipse, a total solar eclipse, in late August, and that will be in late Leo. Okay, and so that will be, again, I'll have details about that later. But again, a shifting time period. Mercury is going to retrograde from the Earth sign Virgo around mid-August back into the fire sign of Leo in early September. So again, Earth to fire. So we're burning up something physical, and in that case, we're going to be burning up our routines, loosening up so that we can create new routines that are a better reflection of our true creative expression. And that's going to be the theme of August, is that shifting into our creative expression. At that point, the nodes will be shifted into Leo Aquarius. Those eclipses will be in Leo and Aquarius. And so we're really, again, utilizing what we've been learning in our community, in our village, for ourselves, for our highest expression, to have an offering in some way. Okay? And so after that point, as we get into October, Jupiter is actually going to switch out of Libra. It's going to be in Libra. It's been in Libra since this fall. It's going to be in Libra up until October 10th, and then it's going to shift over into Scorpio. And so that's going to be a shift as well. But I want to get to what's happening in the fall with that shift to Jupiter and Scorpio after I discuss kind of what the general planets are doing with each other. Because all the outer planets, for the most part, are all interacting this year, and they've all started just in the last few weeks. So about November, December, we're seeing the aspects that are going to dominate 2017 right on through the end of the summer into the fall. that are initiating now, and they're initiating these last few weeks. And so we have Jupiter in Libra, we have Saturn in Sagittarius, Uranus in Aries, and then we have Pluto in Capricorn and Chiron in Pisces. And so there's interactions between these planets all year. And so those configurations are, number one, we have a sextile. That's 60 degrees, a very flowing aspect between Saturn in Sagittarius, Jupiter in Libra. And what this is this general theme that's, again, just started, that's going to be lasting through the summer into the fall, is of kind of expanding truth, okay, and making room for better relations because of it. Okay, that's really what the opportunity is here with that transit. And in addition to that, we have Uranus that will be connected to that, because it'll be trining Saturn in Sagittarius, and it will be opposing Jupiter in Libra. And so Uranus in Aries, that's been there since 2010. That is this coming into our sovereign authority, our sovereign self, our authenticity, okay? And so that opposing Jupiter is suggesting that, just like the theme of the Venus retrograde and the Mercury retrograde right after that in the spring, where we're coming into our own, we're releasing our old ideas of relationship, our old codependencies, and by having a better sense of self, we're able to relate better and in more harmony. That's a general theme of those outer planets as well. And so the more we're stepping into our sovereign authority, the better we can create harmonious relations. So that's that Uranus, sovereign authenticity, opposing Jupiter, that expansion of relationship. And so we're able to have better relationships because of that difference. And with Saturn in Sagittarius trining Uranus, it kind of takes that planet of Uranus, which can be very surprising in its energy, and it grounds it. So grounding that energy is really going to be good for setting us on the right path, because Saturn in Sagittarius has to do with our own unique path that we're headed down, and making sure that we're taking solid steps toward that. And so this whole configuration of Saturn, Uranus, Jupiter is working together for this most of this year to essentially help us be in our most unique, authentic selves in a way that's aligned with our path and our intentions for the future. And in doing so, opens up the opportunity for better relations with others. And that will help us also. So it's like partnership, whether it's business partnership, personal partnership, whatever. It's all on the upswing here. So if we look at that on the collective level, I mean, this really suggests that there's going to be a surprising level of cooperation amongst world leaders in 2017. And so you might think, how is that possible? But understand the media is definitely trying to make things look worse than they are. But relations are certain to improve. But there's also expect some surprises. Some surprises, like people you wouldn't think would unite are uniting or working together. And you're like, what? How is that possible? Why would they work together? But that's what's happening, is that what you least expect works together, and it works out well. That's the other side of it. And so there's a sense of almost destined union to the year. So I know that sounds, if you listen to like YouTube's about twin flames and whatnot, that word union and whatnot, but that just popped out. But that's also part of this year too. So if you're into the twin flame thing, that's something that could very well be blossoming for a lot of twin flames if you're on that path this year, kind of like surprise unions and that kind of thing that come out of nowhere, etc. But on a collective scale, I see that as more of the nations getting along better and stuff and such. In addition to this, though, there is a sense of truth coming out this year with Saturn and Sagittarius squaring Chiron and Pisces in a way. And so in other words, the truth is coming out in a way that will kind of trigger people's wounds, but it will open up the pathway toward the future in a way that now we can accept and release whatever we thought was true and open up to what actually is true. Jupiter squaring Pluto and Capricorn all for most of the year as well. What this suggests is it goes back to this theme as well, that there's an adjustment in how world governance is happening. And for us on a personal level, it's how we're governing ourselves, just like this Mercury retrograde, our thoughts that we live by, our rules that we live by. And again, expanding opportunities to relate despite the shifting sands of how the monetary system is and how the economy is in general. Okay, and so, but expect some people, and it might be yourself as well, to be very shocked by some of the truth that comes out this year, and be ready to adjust quickly. But again, this is also going to be probably because of Trump. You understand? I think a lot of things that are going to be exposed as far as, we already have like Trump's cabinet and the details of what's coming through that, and it's in mainstream media. You could find out the information about the sketchy characters that Obama was having on his cabinet, but you couldn't find it in mainstream media because the mainstream media is definitely geared toward the left wing. And so now they're going to be exposing the things that have always existed because they're trying to get at Trump, who they're not a fan of, right? And so we're going to see a lot of exposure. People say, oh, wow, he's even worse than we thought. It's so bad. But we're going to realize, but wait a minute, let's backtrack here. Look at the last few presidents how whatever this issue is, however it occurred previously, but it wasn't really presented through the media. And so we're going to just basically be facing the shadow. Again, the things that have always existed, that have been hidden, are going to come out to be seen. And Trump is serving the role, that scapegoat, of being the one that is going to have the fingers pointed at him as the one who is so bad and dirty, when in reality he's just going to be representing the shadow of all the presidents previous. Okay? And even the ones that you might think, wow, no, there's no way he would do that or that. That's part of the surprises coming out. Part of this realization that what we thought was true might not be true. But it's an exciting year, I think. So I think I'll leave it at that. If you have any questions, let me know. I'm also going to be doing some special promotions for the beginning of this year for a yearly reading, 2017 yearly reading for yourself, as well as I want to do a relationship special reading because it is a year of expanded truth and new relating with the Venus retrograde and Jupiter in Libra opposing Uranus in Aries. So I think it's an important year to really understand our differences and how we can get along better. So I'm going to do a special, at least through the first part of the year, on that. And then I want to introduce another opportunity for people that work with teams, because again, it's about getting your team to get along, to increase productivity, and keep profits up as high as possible. So if you work on a small business team, that's something else that I can help with. And again, it goes along with this theme of helping us understand what our differences are, dealing with the differences in a way that we can set better boundaries and create better, more harmonious relations. Anyway, so I will wrap it up there. So thank you for tuning in to Christopher Taylor at Sovereign Harmony. Again, if you have any questions, let me know. If you're interested in one of the promotions, let me know. And I will talk to you again soon. Great. Have a great holiday season, New Year, and I will see you in 2017. Thanks a lot.